Rain was falling like 1,000 broken needles from the sky, each drop sharp against Emma's skin, the streets deserted except for the dim flicker of tired streetlights that buzzed like dying fireflies, the wind carrying a low hum as if the city itself was holding its breath, and there she was, black leather jacket clinging to her shoulders, heavy boots splashing through shallow pools, one hand gripping a small worn-out bag that she refused to let go, eyes scanning the shadows ahead. From the darkness, a car rolled into view, slow, deliberate, its tires whispering against wet asphalt, headlights slicing through the downpour until they pinned her like a spotlight on a stage she didn't want to be on. She froze for just a fraction of a heartbeat, rain blurring her vision, but even through the haze she caught the faintest outline of a shadow inside, the ember of a cigarette glowing between unseen lips, and then a laugh. Low. Almost amused. Need a ride? The voice rumbled through the rain, deep enough to feel in her bones. She turned without answering, her boots splashing harder now, the sound of the car following her like a predator keeping pace with its prey, not too close, not too far, always there. The alley ahead narrowed, and at the end, a dying neon sign buzzed to life in uneven pulses. Hotel, half the letters missing, the O flickering like it was gasping for air. She pushed through the creaky door into a lobby where the air smelled of old wood and forgotten dust. An ancient fan spun lazily overhead, squeaking on every turn. Behind the counter sat an old man with eyes like glass marbles, who slid a tarnished brass key across to her without a word. She took it, stepped into the wheezing elevator, the doors groaning shut behind her. As the lift climbed, a slow drip of water pattered onto the floor from the ceiling above, steady, rhythmic, like footsteps pacing somewhere over her head. Her floor came, the doors sliding open with a reluctant sigh. She walked down the narrow hallway, carpet worn thin in the middle from decades of footsteps, until she reached her door. The key turned with a tired click. Inside, dim light from the window revealed a small bed, and on it a bag. Not hers. She stepped closer, her breath shallow, unzipped it, and froze. Inside was only an old phone, cold and lifeless until, without her touching it, the screen lit up, casting a ghostly glow across her face. A video began to play. Darkness, the sound of heavy breathing, a faint scratching like fingernails against. Her hands trembled as the phone's glow pulsed like a heartbeat, each flash illuminating more of the dim room, revealing stains on the walls, a single chair in the corner, and a cracked mirror that seemed to lean toward her as if listening. The rain outside intensified, rattling against the thin glass, and in that noise she could almost hear whispers. A sudden knock at the door made her jump, sharp and deliberate, 3 times. She froze, holding her breath. No voice followed. Another knock, slower now, heavier. She stepped backward, her foot creaking on the wooden floor. When she glanced at the mirror again, her reflection wasn't matching her movements. It was smiling. The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The phone's glow became the only source of light, and on its screen, a map appeared, not of the hotel, but of an unfamiliar industrial complex, corridors and rooms marked in red, with a blinking to where she stood. Then a robotic female voice emerged from the phone speaker. Level 1, corridor breach in 30 seconds. Panic surged through her veins, and without thinking, she grabbed her bag and ran for the hallway. The hotel had changed, walls no longer faded and cracked, but metallic and humming with unseen machinery. Doors along the corridor opened and shut in rapid sequence, as if something was chasing her in perfect rhythm with her heartbeat. Her boots pounded against the steel floor as she reached an intersection. Left led to darkness, right to a faint blue light. She turned right. The blue light grew brighter, revealing massive sliding doors that hissed open just in time for her to dash through. They slammed shut behind her with a metallic boom, echoing into the vast, cold chamber she now found herself in. The walls here were lined with screens, each displaying footage of her walking the streets, entering the hotel, even moments she couldn't remember living. Level 2, the same voice intoned. The ground vibrated, and from the shadows emerged tall, thin figures, their heads shrouded in static like broken television signals, movements jerky and unnatural. They didn't walk, they glitched forward in short, sudden bursts, closing the distance far too quickly. Emma's breath came fast, her eyes darting for an escape, when one of the screens suddenly shifted to display a single message: "They are memories you ran from." One of the figures lunged, passing straight through her like smoke, but she felt it, like ice flooding her veins, a sharp replay of a night she had tried to erase. Gritting her teeth, she ran again, weaving between them, until she reached another sliding door. She slammed her hand on the panel, it hissed open, and she stumbled through into a blindingly bright space. Emma's eyes burned as the blinding light faded, revealing an enormous hall, silent, white, and impossibly clean, as if no living thing had ever touched it. The air here was cold, but not the kind that makes you shiver. This was the kind that felt dead, like the air inside a sealed tomb. Her footsteps echoed unnaturally loud, each one bouncing off invisible walls that seemed farther away than they looked. In the center of the hall stood a single object, a black cube hovering inches above the floor, rotating slowly. As she approached, the cube's surface rippled like liquid, and distorted reflections of herself emerged on each side, but not the Emma she knew. One reflection had her face bruised and eyes hollow, another wore a soldier's armor and held a blood-stained blade, another was younger, softer, smiling in a way she couldn't remember doing for years. They stared back at her like silent judges. She reached out, and the moment her fingers touched its surface, the floor beneath her dissolved, swallowing her into weightless darkness. The fall seemed endless until, suddenly, her boots slammed onto solid ground again. The space around her had changed. She now stood on a narrow metal bridge suspended over an ocean of shifting fog. Far below, something moved, shapes too large and too slow to be human, their silhouettes vanishing into the mist. The bridge stretched on for hundreds of meters, disappearing into a distant archway lit by a pulsating red light. She took a step forward, the bridge groaning under her weight, when a metallic voice boomed from somewhere overhead: "Level 3, Trial of Pursuit." From behind, the fog began to churn violently, and with it came the sound of claws scraping metal. She glanced back. Something was emerging from the mist, a huge, insect-like silhouette with too many legs, its movements jerky and unnerving, like a nightmare skipping frames. Its head twitched toward her, two glowing red eyes locking on, and it began to move, impossibly fast. Emma broke into a sprint, the metal bridge vibrating under her as she ran, her breath loud in her ears, the archway still far ahead. The creature's claws clicked louder, faster. She could almost feel its heat on her back. Without thinking, she leapt onto the side railing, swinging herself under the bridge, clinging to the steel frame as the thing thundered past overhead. She waited, heart slamming against her ribs, until its sound faded into the distance, and then began climbing up again. When she reached the surface, the archway was closer now, but the red light had shifted to a deep, ominous violet. She stepped through, and everything went silent. The silence inside the archway wasn't just the absence of sound. It was oppressive, the kind that seemed to press against her eardrums until she could hear her own pulse. The space was narrow, almost claustrophobic, with walls of matte black material that absorbed every trace of light except for a thin, glowing line running along the floor, guiding her forward like a runway in the void. Her boots touched it carefully, the faint hum of electricity tingling up her legs. Then, out of nowhere, a soundless image projected itself into the air in front of her, a memory, not a dream, not a vision, a crystal-clear scene from her own past. She saw herself, maybe 10 years younger, standing in a rain-soaked alley, her hands trembling as she handed over a small package to a man whose face was hidden by shadows. The moment ended abruptly, shattering into shards of light that fell like glass and vanished. She kept walking, each step triggering another scene: a childhood bedroom with drawings on the walls, a burning warehouse with sirens screaming in the distance, a hospital room with an empty bed and a single white flower on the nightstand. The more she walked, the heavier her chest became, as if the air itself was forcing her to remember the things she had buried. The glowing line on the floor curved sharply, leading her into a chamber shaped like a dome, its ceiling lost in darkness. In the center was a chair, sleek, metallic, with wires snaking from its base into the floor. Level 4. The voice said softly, almost kindly now. Trial of truth. Before she could react, the chair rotated to face her, and sitting in it was herself. Not a reflection this time. Emma's eyes followed her, unblinking, lips curling into a smirk. "You've been running for so long," the other Emma said in her exact voice, "but you never stopped to wonder from what?" The real Emma stepped closer, fists clenched. The double leaned forward, the room's shadows clinging to her like liquid. "You think this is a game? No. This is you. Every choice, every lie, every time you chose survival over everything else. And now," she pointed at the real Emma, "you finish what you started, or it finishes you." Emma's throat tightened, her mind scrambling for words, but before she could speak, the dome around them began to pulse, each beat sending ripples through the floor like waves. The other Emma stood up from the chair, their movements perfectly in sync for a split second before breaking into unsettling asynchrony, like a mirror trying to decide which one was real. Without warning, the double lunged, their hands locking around Emma's wrists with impossible strength. Level 5, Trial of Endurance, the mechanical voice announced, its tone no longer neutral but laced with something almost amused. The floor split open beneath them, revealing a vertical shaft with no visible bottom, and both were pulled down into freefall. Wind screamed past her ears, the other Emma's face inches away, morphing, sometimes hers, sometimes a stranger's, sometimes a pale, eyeless mask. They slammed into water so dark and deep that the shock nearly stole her breath. The double released her, vanishing into the depths, and she swam upward desperately, lungs burning. When she broke the surface, she was in an underground reservoir, lit only by scattered lanterns floating like fireflies. A metallic clang echoed across the water. One of the lanterns toppled over, its light hissing out, followed by another and another, as something massive moved just beneath the surface toward her. Ripples became waves, pushing her toward a jagged shore of black stone. She climbed out, coughing, shivering, the water dripping from her clothes sizzling as it touched the ground. The walls here seemed alive, faintly breathing, their texture like muscle beneath translucent skin. At the far end of the cavern, a single door stood, wooden and fragile-looking, utterly out of place. As she approached, the voice returned, this time whispering so close to her ear she could feel its breath. "Final level, only one leaves." Her hand hovered over the door handle, her heart pounding with the weight of everything she had seen, everything she had run from. Then, from the shadows behind her, footsteps, slow, deliberate, and that same smirk she had seen in the chair. Emma turned slowly, the dripping sound from her soaked clothes blending with the echo of those approaching footsteps. The other Emma emerged from the gloom, no longer a perfect copy, parts of her face glitching, flashing between versions, younger, older, bruised, smiling, crying, lifeless. "We've reached the end," the double said, voice splitting into layers, some human, some mechanical. "Only one can walk through that door." The cavern walls pulsed faster now, like a living heart under strain, their rhythmic thud syncing with Emma's racing pulse. "And if I refuse?" Emma asked, her voice shaking but steady enough to mask the terror clawing at her ribs. The double's smirk widened. "Then you stay here forever. A shadow in someone else's game." The ground trembled, cracks racing toward them, and the black water began to churn violently as if the whole place was collapsing inward. Without another word, the double lunged, and they collided with a force that knocked the air from Emma's lungs. They struggled, fists and elbows, each blow echoing like thunder in the closing space. The double's strength was inhuman, but Emma fought with a desperation born of knowing this was not just survival, it was the last chance to reclaim herself. She fainted, letting the double's momentum carry her forward, then drove her shoulder hard into her opponent, slamming them against the jagged wall. The glitching figure screamed, a sound like shattering glass, and in that instant, Emma grabbed the double's face, staring into her own fractured eyes. "You're not me," she whispered, and with all her strength, shoved the double backward into the boiling black water. The cavern roared, light exploding from the door ahead, and she ran for it, the world collapsing behind her. As her hand touched the handle, the voice, now soft, almost human, whispered, "Level complete." The door burst open, blinding light consuming everything, and when her vision returned, she was standing back in her apartment, phone in hand, a new message on the screen. "Level 1. Ready when you are."